Thank you. Excellencies, Ministers and distinguished representatives, it's a great honour for me to speak at this eminent panel, and I thank you for this opportunity. Now, I'm going to start this afternoon just with a few reflections from the discussions that we've had this week, because we've all been speaking about accountability in many different forms in many different gatherings this week. But what does it actually mean? And despite the sound of the word, it doesn't mean just giving account. It's not like handing in an expense claim and showing how you spent the money. No, it's much more than that. And to me, it means setting targets and being responsible for making development happen. And as we heard from Paulette Bethel this morning, this isn't about making commitments, it's about delivering them. And crucially, it's about being responsible to learn and improve. And this requires a variety of mechanisms. We need data and monitoring processes so we can see whether we're on track, and to enable the watchdog element of accountability. But we also need spaces where we can openly and honestly discuss successes, failures, and lessons so that we can learn. And yesterday we heard from Professor Robert Chambers, who set out the prerequisites for this type of learning in the form of 3 T's: trust, transparency, and truth. When we trust each other, we can have a frank and open discussion, and we can get to the bottom of things. And additionally, we need to know what we're all responsible for. And many speakers throughout the week have stressed that we all have responsibility to make development happen. And indeed, we've heard this afternoon, whether we're donor governments, developing country governments, civil society, local governments, private sector, parliamentarians. We play a unique role in our relationships, and with that come unique responsibilities. But many of us would agree that MDG 8 was too fuzzy to track properly. And perhaps one of the problems was that it wasn't clear who was responsible for what. And in that sense, it's a classic project failure. But we can and we must do better for post-2015. And we have the ingredients to design a robust post-2015 global accountability framework for development cooperation. We've heard about some of those elements from some of the other speakers on this panel. We can make it work, but this depends on our political will to make it work. So, getting to the question, how could a post-2015 global monitoring and accountability framework for development cooperation be designed to build on existing accountability mechanisms at all levels? Now, as set out by Jose Antonio Ocampo and Natalie Gomez-Artiaga in their recent and excellent paper that was presented at the Germany Symposium of the Development Cooperation Forum, accountability mechanisms should address 3 imperatives, which are answerability, enforcement, and a clear delineation of responsibility. And I'm going to briefly focus on how these 3 elements can be brought together at different levels, drawing on existing mechanisms where these are there. So firstly, developing country leadership provides the foundation for accountability, for answerability at all levels. So efforts to monitor partnerships need to be grounded in developing countries' own accountability mechanisms and information systems. And this is already happening. So, for example, the first monitoring round of the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation saw a wide range of countries drawing on existing data and processes to feed into a global accountability mechanism. And several countries, such as Rwanda and Cambodia, have had systems in place for some time, and they relied on these to gather the relevant monitoring information. So, ideally, we should rely on country-led processes both to generate simple snapshots of progress at the global level and to ensure that global processes are answerable to local citizens. But, as we've heard already this afternoon, this needs strong local systems and high-quality data. So we need to invest in a data revolution to build effective and accountable states, which is the foundation for answerability at all levels. Secondly, at the regional level, regional structures can and should play a key role in consolidating accountability and generating the peer pressure and the learning needed to drive change. Again, we have existing mechanisms which show the way. An excellent example of this is the Pacific Island Forum compact, which monitors partnership behaviour according to globally agreed effectiveness principles and includes a peer review across all partners. And peer reviews are also core to the OECD business model. And we've seen that the way these work, accountability among peers, sparks peer learning and collective progress. So regional mechanisms can provide appropriate pressure and incentives for the enforcement aspect of monitoring in ways that fit the region's context. And looking ahead, these structures could play an important role in enabling cross-regional sharing of best practice and the fostering of mutual learning of what works in different contexts. And then finally, looking at the global level, this is where all of this comes together to spur action for more and better results. And we know that having a global framework and targets gives the reference point needed to negotiate more detailed accountability frameworks in country, whether we're talking about the MDGs, whether we're talking about the aid effectiveness work, many other examples. Having this global framework is a reference point for the discussions at country level. But it goes beyond this too. So, for example, the global principles for effective development cooperation have been successfully adapted to many different contexts and priorities, including the International Health Partnership, which has used the Busan principles to monitor and enhance the effectiveness of partnerships in the health sector. And within the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, different groups are setting their own commitments against which they will be monitored. So this includes initiatives such as the New Deal for Engagement in Fragile States, the recently developed guidelines for effective philanthropic engagement, and the Istanbul Principles for CSO development effectiveness. And these frameworks help to define everyone's roles and responsibilities, which is the third element that was identified by Ocampo and Arteaga in their paper. And this is the key lesson that we learned from MDG 8. We need this in place. And then just finally, at OECD, we found that while monitoring needs accurate data, it's not just the numbers that count, and it's important to have the data, it's important that it's accurate, that we can trust it, but that's not the be-all and the end-all. It's the dialogue and learning that change behaviours and mindsets. And these have a transformative impact and can set in motion a race to the top. So in addition to robust monitoring mechanisms, we need inclusive spaces to review progress and have a frank dialogue on what works, what doesn't, and how to make things work better. And just as an aside here, I'll say that one of the most frustrating things in working on aid effectiveness was to start a conversation where you're allowed to say, actually, aid hasn't been as effective as we've been saying it is. So we have to be honest if we're going to learn and make progress. And this is why partnerships, why relationships matter for accountability. We can't have a discussion about development without having everyone at the table working together. And as we were reminded yesterday by Professor Chambers, trust is the starting point for genuine partnership, and it is the political will to be held to account by each other that builds that trust. Thank you.